They say the city of Rio de Janeiro never truly slept in 1856. It dreamed, and the dream was gold, sugar, and silence. If you walked through the narrow streets of the imperial capital after midnight, you'd hear the same rhythm: the hiss of the sea, the rustle of chains, and the laughter of the powerful echoing from candlelit balconies. The Empire of Brazil was dressed in white silk, but beneath its fabric, blood still pulsed, dark, quiet, and unseen. That's where the story begins, with a woman who was supposed to be untouchable. A Sinha, a lady of class, land, and lineage. Her name was Eugênia de Albuquerque, and history almost forgot her, not because she died young, but because she dared to live as someone she was never meant to be. In the spring of 1856, when Rio's hills were still dotted with sugar mansions and slave quarters, Eugênia vanished. No carriage tracks led away from her house. No ransom letters. No witnesses. She simply disappeared from the empire's golden stage. But 3 months later, rumors spread through the docks and the markets. A new enslaved woman had been seen working on a coffee farm near Parody. She had a strange accent, soft hands, and a scar shaped like a crescent moon behind her ear, the same scar that Lady Eugênia had since childhood. At first, people laughed. A rich woman disguising herself as a slave? Impossible. Madness. But as the Empire's police began investigating, the story turned darker and far more human, because what they found wasn't just a woman in hiding. It was a life turned inside out, the predator wearing the skin of the prey. Rio in the 1850s was a paradox. The Empire had abolished the slave trade, at least on paper, but the streets still smelled of sweat and sugar. Every ship that entered Guanabara Bay carried secrets: a few barrels of rum, a few souls in the cargo hold, and the silent complicity of the powerful. Eugenia's family was among them, the Albuquerques, owners of 2 plantations in Campos, and investors in illegal trade that never really stopped. Her father, Colonel Domingos Albuquerque, was a man the newspapers called the Gentleman of the Cane Fields. But those who worked for him knew a different name: the Lion of Campos. He ruled his house with sermons and whips, preaching virtue while trading human lives in the shadows. At the center of that house stood Eugênia, young, educated, praised for her beauty, trapped in a golden cage built by her own bloodline. There was one rule she was never allowed to break. No woman of her name was to leave the family estate without her father's consent. But one night in March, as the moon hung low over the bay, Eugênia did, and she didn't leave as a lady. Witnesses later recalled seeing a small group of women descending the back road from the manor. They carried baskets on their heads, their faces covered in shawls. Among them, one walked slower, less used to the weight. No one looked twice. Slaves often walked that way. By dawn, a ship left for the coast of Parody. Among its workers was a woman listed simply as Ana, 24, Creole. The captain's log described her as quiet, literate, and strange, refused to remove her head wrap. What no one realized then was that beneath that wrap, Eugênia had cut her hair, the last symbol of her class, and darkened her skin with the same oils used by the women she once commanded. Why would a woman of privilege trade silk for rags? That's what the Imperial Police tried to answer. At first, they suspected kidnapping, then scandal, perhaps a forbidden affair. But the evidence told another story. A note found in her bedroom, half burned, written in Latin: "To know what I have done, you must live what I denied." Her handwriting, her mind, her choice. The investigation spread across the empire. From Rio's aristocratic salons to the docks where freed Africans sold fish by candlelight. Whispers emerged that Eugênia had not fled from danger, but from herself, that she sought to understand the world she had helped oppress. And what's more disturbing, some said she found it on a small plantation near Parody, owned by a widow named Dona Teresa de Costa. Records show an enslaved woman named Ana appearing in mid-1856. She spoke softly, avoided mirrors, and could read, which made the overseer suspicious. When questioned, she claimed she'd been born in Bahia and sold as a child. But one night, a fellow worker, Maria das Dores, told a priest that she'd seen Ana praying in Latin, whispering verses in the Psalms, tears running down her face. Only the Sinhas pray like that, she said. That was when the rumor became legend. Imagine this for a second. A woman born into power decides to taste the silence she created, to feel the weight of the chains she once ignored. What kind of guilt or madness could lead someone to do that? Maybe it wasn't madness at all. Maybe it was revelation. Because sometimes, the only way to see a system's cruelty is from the bottom of it. By the end of that winter, the Imperial Police closed the case. They declared Eugenia presumed dead. Her family held a funeral with a closed casket. No one ever saw her again, at least not as a lady. But in the Registry of Parity's church, one final entry remains. Anna, freed woman, baptized again in December 1856. The signature below, a shaky, elegant hand. Ida A. Some say she died there, buried under the name she chose. Others claim she escaped the North, joining abolitionist circles in secret. But the truth, like the empire itself, hid behind lace and law. And that's where our investigation begins. If there's one thing the empire feared more than rebellion, it was humiliation. And a lady abandoning her own bloodline to live as a slave was the kind of scandal that could rot a family's name for generations. So when whispers reached Rio that a strange new enslaved woman had appeared in Parity, the Albuquerques did what powerful families always did. They buried the truth under money, men, and silence. But the truth has a habit of surviving in the shadows. 3 weeks after Eugenia's disappearance, her father summoned a man known only as Joao de Anca, not a police officer, not an investigator, a hunter, the kind used to track escaped slaves through forests, swamps, and months of rain. He had a reputation for patience and cruelty. People said Joao could recognize fear by its smell. Colonel Albuquerque gave him just one instruction: find the woman who embarrassed my house and bring her back without a name. No one ever wrote down what he meant by that, but those who worked for the colonel claimed he didn't need to. Meanwhile, in Parity, life moved slowly, the kind of slowness that lets secrets hide in plain sight. The sugar warehouse smelled of molasses and sweat. Children carried baskets of firewood. A priest dozed in the shade while plantation bells rang in the distance. And among the workers, Anna, the disguised lady, moved like a ghost learning to imitate the living. Some say she never fully understood how to walk like an enslaved woman. She kept her back too straight. Her eyes wandered too high. Her hands shook when she touched rough work tools. But the strange thing wasn't how she failed. It was how quickly she learned, almost as if she had been rehearsing her own downfall for years. Still, small inconsistencies began to surface. Her accent slipped. Her reading was too fluent. She once called a shovel a spade, a word only educated households used. And, most dangerously, she prayed like a woman who had known Latin hymns since childhood. Maria das Dores, the enslaved woman who prayed beside her, would later confess. It was as if she'd lived two lives, one made of gold and one made of guilt. Dona Teresa de Costa, the widow who owned the farm, rarely paid attention to new workers, but her overseer, Antonio Gadelha, did. He didn't trust quiet people. Quiet meant secrets. Secrets meant trouble. And trouble meant punishment for him. He started watching Anna, from doorways, from across fields, from behind the church fence. And the more he watched, the more he felt something was wrong. One night, he broke into the small storage room where Anna slept, not to harm her, though men like him rarely needed excuses, but to search for anything that proved she wasn't who she claimed to be. He found nothing. No silk, no jewels, no letters, just a scrap of paper hidden under the straw mattress. On it, a single Latin phrase burned with candle soot. Veritas in abyssum descended. Truth descends into the abyss. Antonio didn't understand Latin, but he understood danger. He folded the paper, put it in his pocket, and walked out with a new idea forming in his mind, one he had no intention of sharing with the widow. Joao de Anca reached Parity at dawn. People recognized him instantly, by the knife at his belt, by the scars on his knuckles, by the way dogs lowered their heads when he passed. He spoke to no one. He didn't need stories. He needed tracks. He went to the docks, to the markets, to the church, and finally to the plantation. There, Antonio Gadelha greeted him with the smile of a man who saw an opportunity. Looking for someone? Joao nodded once. A woman, he said. Born rich, pretending not to be. Antonio didn't hesitate. He handed over the scrap of paper. She prays in this tongue, he whispered, and she's not who she says she is. From that moment, Anna's days were numbered. One Sunday evening, after the workers had returned from Mass, Maria das Dores found Anna sitting by the well, staring at her reflection in the moonlit water. Her face was smudged with soot. Her clothes were torn. Her hair had grown unevenly. But for the first time, Maria said, Anna looked like a woman at peace. She whispered, I'm not running anymore. Maria, sensing danger without knowing why, grabbed her hand. Then you'll die. But Anna only smiled, a strange, calm smile. All lives have two stories, she said. The one you inherit and the one you choose. She didn't know that Joao de Anca was already on the property, or that Antonio had shown him where she slept, or that men like Joao didn't capture people. They erased them. Near midnight, the dogs started barking. The air tightened. Even the insects went silent. Maria woke to shouts, torches, footsteps, a man's voice screaming, She's here! Anna tried to flee. She didn't get far. Joao caught her by the arm near the storage room door. But instead of fighting, she looked directly into his eyes. Witnesses later testified that she whispered something, a single sentence that made the hunter hesitate. Some claimed she said, You know this life too. Others said it was, Freedom makes traitors of all of us. But Joao never confirmed either version. What we do know is that he didn't kill her. He tied her hands. He lifted her chin, and he stared at the crescent-shaped scar behind her ear. Then he muttered, The Colonel will bury this himself. When Dona Teresa found out who Anna truly was, she didn't react with shock. She reacted with fear. The Albuquerques were powerful, too powerful. She begged Joao to take the woman away quietly. Let her die elsewhere, she whispered. My land has seen enough ghosts. But the hunter shook his head. He had orders sealed with gold. Bound at the wrists, bruised, exhausted, Anna was kept in the plantation's tool shed until dawn. Maria managed to slip inside for a moment. She pressed her forehead against Anna's and whispered, Why did you come here? Why live our life if you had another? Anna answered with a breath instead of words. Maria later described it like this. She didn't want forgiveness. She wanted the truth to touch her skin. At sunrise, Joao put on a mule and began the journey back to Rio de Janeiro, back to the family she had fled, back to the name she had tried to bury, back to a house that would rather see her dead than free. And that was when the real nightmare began. When Joao de Anca rode back into Rio de Janeiro with Anna bound to saddle, the city was just waking up. Fishermen dragged nets across the sand. Children carried buckets of water up steep alleys. And from the distant hills, the bells of Santa Teresa echoed like warnings no one wanted to hear. But there was something strange that morning. People later said the dogs along the road howled as the hunter passed, not at him, but at the woman riding behind him, as if they sensed she carried a truth too heavy for one body. Joao didn't stop, not for food, not for rest, not for mercy. He had a name to restore, one that wasn't hers. The Albuquerque mansion stood on a rise overlooking the harbor, its white walls glowing in the early sun like polished bone. It looked peaceful from a distance, but those who lived nearby knew better. Behind its doors, everything was discipline, hierarchy, and fear disguised as tradition. When Joao arrived, 2 guards opened the gates without a word. Servants were ordered inside. Curtains were drawn. Even the birds seemed to fall silent. Colonel Domingos Albuquerque stepped out onto the veranda, not in anger, but in disappointment deeper than rage. He stared at the woman who had once been his daughter. Her skin was darker from oil and sun. Her hands were calloused. Her clothes were torn. But her eyes were the same. And that was what enraged him most. Take her to the cellar, the colonel said. She enters this house nameless. Joao hesitated, just long enough for the colonel to notice, but then obeyed. They dragged Anna below the staircase. into a stone room where iron rings were still fixed into walls from older, darker days. The Empire claimed such places no longer existed. The Albuquerques knew better. The law ended on paper. Power never ended at all. That night, the mansion was lit only by candles. Not for mourning, but for secrecy. The colonel summoned 3 people. His wife, Dona Beatriz, his eldest son, Roberto, and Father Amancio, the family's confessor. No one else was allowed to speak. It wasn't a legal trial. It wasn't an exorcism. It was something older, a ritual of reputation. In the cellar, Ana was brought forward, wrist-bound, face bruised, but silent. Dona Beatriz didn't look at her daughter. She stared at the floor, hands trembling in her lap, a mother who feared more for her name than her child. Roberto watched Ana with hatred sharpened by shame. To him, she had humiliated the family before society, a crime worse than any sin. Father Amancio held a rosary and whispered prayers that sounded more like negotiations with God than requests for mercy. At last, the colonel spoke. "Eugenia," he said, refusing the false name she had chosen. "Tell this family why you chose disgrace." But Ana didn't answer. So he slapped her, not to hurt her, but to punish the silence. "Speak." Still, she remained quiet. And that was when Dona Beatriz finally looked at her daughter and whispered, "What did we do to you?" Ana lifted her head. Her voice was soft but steady. "You raised me blind," she said, "and I opened my eyes." As the family pressed her to explain herself, Ana didn't confess guilt or madness. She told them something they weren't prepared to hear. She described the lives of the women she had lived beside in parody, their exhaustion, their hunger, the songs they used to keep their hope alive, the fear they carried like a second skin. She spoke of Maria das Dores, how she shared the last of her food, how she prayed for strangers, how she worked herself to the edge of collapse just to survive another day. Then she said, "A woman born in a cage can't understand another cage unless she walks inside it." Roberto interrupted her with a shout. "You shame us." But Ana continued, "I only live the truth we pretend doesn't exist." Even Father Amancio lowered his eyes. The colonel wasn't a man easily shaken, but Anna's words struck something buried beneath years of discipline and arrogance. For a moment, he looked almost human. But shame destroys empathy faster than hatred. "You are no longer my daughter," he said. "You are a scandal that must be erased." Dona Beatriz gasped, but she didn't protest. In that house, silence was inherited like land. Roberto stepped forward. "Father, let me deal with her." But the colonel raised a hand. "No, she belongs to God now." He turned to Father Amancio. "Take her to the convent. The sisters will keep her silent. Forever." Ana reacted for the first time. She pulled against the ropes. "I won't live behind another wall," she said. The colonel's jaw tightened. "Then you won't live at all." It was the closest he ever came to sentencing his own child. Unseen behind a wooden panel, a house servant named Joaquin witnessed the entire tribunal. He had served the family for 12 years, long enough to understand exactly what would happen to Ana if no one intervened. Joaquin wasn't a hero. He wasn't a revolutionary. He was a man who had learned to survive by observing. But something in Anna's voice, the clarity, the stubbornness, the refusal to bow, broke the numbness he had carried his whole life. He knew he couldn't fight the colonel. But maybe, just maybe, he could do something else. Later that night, while the house slept, Joaquin crept into the cellar. Ana was chained to the floor, but awake. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Joaquin pressed a finger to his lips and whispered, "I can't free you, but I can give you a chance." He loosened the hinge of a small side window, barely large enough for a thin body. "If the guards change at dawn, you'll have 1 minute. No more." Ana stared at him, suspicious, confused, grateful. "Why, help me," she whispered. Joaquin swallowed hard. "Because you saw us. All of us. Not as shadows, but as people." Then he left, and the cellar returned to silence, except for Anna's heartbeat, loud enough to feel in her throat. The sky turned pale. The air cooled. The guard shifted. Ana pulled the chain. It didn't break. She tried again. Nothing. She whispered to herself, a prayer, or maybe courage, and then one link snapped. Too old, too rusted, too forgotten. Anna crawled to the window. Her shoulders barely fit. Her back scraped against a stone. Her breath caught in her chest. But she pushed, and for one miraculous moment, she passed through. She fell into the dew-covered garden, gasping, alive, free, but hunted, because at that exact moment, the Colonel woke up, and the house would burn before letting her escape again. When Eugenia, now Anna, slipped through the garden window, the sun had barely touched the horizon. A soft gold light spread across Rio de Janeiro, warming the rooftops, the docks, the hills, but not the Albuquerque mansion. Inside those walls, dawn felt like an alarm, the moment her escape was discovered. The Colonel's voice ripped through the corridors like a blade. Find her, and this time, bring me nothing. Even his servants understood what nothing meant. Joao de Anca was summoned again. He didn't ask questions. He never did. Men like him didn't need the truth, only direction. Within minutes, the hunt began. Anna fled barefoot down a narrow alley behind the house, stumbling over stones and broken tiles. The morning smelled of bakery smoke and salt water, but she had no time to notice. Her breaths were sharp, her steps uneven, her wrists burned where the rope had been. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew where she could never return. Workers beginning their day saw her pass, a woman with torn clothes, wild eyes, and a desperation that made everyone look away. Not because they didn't care, because they had learned that caring was dangerous. Only one person reacted differently. On a hill overlooking the harbor, Joaquim, the servant who had freed her, watched from a distance, silently praying she'd outrun the men whose faces he had memorized too well. He whispered to himself, "Run with everything you have. Today, let God choose sides." Joao de Anca didn't run. He listened. He crouched near the garden where Anna had escaped, touched the wet grass, and felt the broken chain link she had left behind. Then he stood, closed his eyes, and breathed deeply, smelling the direction of her sweat mixed with damp earth. To him, she wasn't a woman. She was a trail, a pattern, a path narrowing toward its own end. He followed without hesitation. Near the busy Largo de Carioca, Anna ducked behind a fountain, trying to catch her breath. Her chest ached. Her legs trembled. A sharp pain spread across her ribs every time she inhaled. An elderly black woman selling herbs noticed her and approached with quiet concern. "Child, where are you going in such a state?" Anna tried to speak, but only managed. "Away." The woman looked into her eyes, really looked, and saw something she recognized, a person running not from punishment, but from a life they refused to accept. She whispered, "Nobody runs far when their chains come from a house they were born in." Anna shook her head. "I won't go back." The woman nodded slowly. "Then may the streets hide you better than the world hid us." She pressed a dried leaf into Anna's hand, a symbol of luck or protection, or maybe a farewell. Minutes later, Joao de Anca passed through the same street. He looked at the woman and said only, "Did you see her?" The woman said nothing. Her silence was a rebellion older than the empire. But Joao smelled the air, and he continued. By mid-morning, Anna reached the harbor. Ships were preparing to leave. Men shouted orders. Crates slammed onto wooden planks. She thought, for one fragile instant, that she might disappear among the workers. That maybe one ship would take her anywhere but here, north-south, even into exile. She stepped toward a schooner with its sails half raised. A voice behind her froze the world. Eugenia, not shouted, spoken, almost whispered. She turned. It wasn't Joao de Anca. It was her brother, Roberto. He stood a few steps away, breathing hard from running, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. "Do you think you can leave like this? Destroy our house and walk into some other life?" Anna didn't answer. Her silence was no longer fear. It was defiance. Roberto stepped forward. "You were born to us. You belong to us." Anna looked directly into his eyes. "I belong to myself." Roberto's face went cold. "You forfeited that right the moment you chose to live as what we own." Behind him, Joao de Anca finally arrived. and the air shifted the way wind changes before storm. Joao stopped between Ana and Roberto. Roberto barked, "Bring her back." Joao didn't move. For the first time, the hunter hesitated openly. Roberto shouted again, "Do your job." Joao turned slightly toward him and asked, in a voice without emotion, "And what is that now? To capture a runaway or to bury a scandal?" Roberto stepped closer, so close their foreheads almost touched. "Just finish it." It was then, in a moment history nearly swallowed whole, that Ana saw something in Joao's face she hadn't noticed before. Exhaustion, disgust, recognition. A man who had spent a lifetime being used by men like Roberto. Joao looked from Roberto to Ana, then to the sea. And without warning, he stepped aside. He didn't help her. He didn't block her. He simply moved, shifting the balance of the world by an inch. Roberto, furious, lunged forward to grab Ana. She dodged. He slipped on the wet dock. He grabbed the fabric of her dress and tore it, but Ana kept running. Roberto screamed her name, not out of love, but out of the kind of hatred only entitlement can produce. But she reached the end of the dock and jumped. She hit the water with a sound swallowed instantly by waves. Her body vanished beneath the surface. She didn't scream. She didn't thrash. For a moment, the world watched the ripples fade. Roberto stared in horror. Joao closed his eyes, and the ocean, indifferent, ancient, vast, carried her away. Some say fishermen saw a woman swimming toward the rocks near the old fortress. Others claim she never resurfaced. Officially, the Albuquerques declared she drowned. Case closed. Name erased. Silence restored. But the people whispered different stories. Months later, in a small village on the northern coast, a woman with short hair, faint scars on her wrists, and a knowledge of Latin hymns began teaching children to read. She never said where she came from. She never used a last name. She never returned to Rio. They called her simply Ana de Costa, a name borrowed from the wind and the sea. Records show that she worked there for 6 years. Then one day, she vanished again, this time without fear, without pursuit, without scars. Some believe she joined abolitionist circles in secret. Others believe she died peacefully in a community that protected her. But one thing is certain, she never lived as a lady again. The Albuquerque struck her name from every document. Portraits were burned, letters destroyed. Even the family Bible was rewritten. But memory is a stubborn witness. Among free communities, her story survived like a quiet flame. A woman who walked out of privilege and into truth. A Sinha who crossed a line no lady was allowed to cross. A daughter who freed herself from her family before freeing anyone else. She became a rumor, a warning, a symbol. And in 1871, when Brazil passed the law of free birth, the first crack in the legal foundations of slavery, some said her ghost walked the streets that night, smiling at the sound of chains beginning to loosen. Take a moment. Imagine the kind of courage or despair it takes to abandon the world that raised you. Not to rise above it, but to descend into the truth it hides. What she did wasn't rebellion. It wasn't madness. It was a question, one so dangerous that an entire empire tried to silence it. What would happen if the powerful were forced to live the lives they create for others? Ana discovered the answer, and she paid for it with the name she used to carry.